All right, today we're going to break down one of the most powerful mental models out there for making better decisions, and maybe more importantly, for survival. It's a concept called the margin of safety, and I think it might just change the way you look at risk.
I mean, when Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor of all time, boils his entire philosophy down to just 3 words, you've got to listen, right? And the crazy part? This whole idea didn't even start with him.
That's right. Before it was a rule for Wall Street, it was a law of physics. It was about building things that absolutely positively could not be allowed to fail. And it all begins with a pretty simple engineering problem.
To really get this, I want you to put on your engineer hat for just a minute. The first rule of building something that's going to last is pretty simple. Assume you're wrong about something.
Okay, so look at this. On the left, you've got a bridge designed right to the absolute edge. I mean, on paper, that 9,800-pound truck should be totally fine. But what if the scales were a little off? What if there's a tiny hidden flaw in the steel? What if a huge gust of wind hits? That's a fragile system. But now look at the right. That's a resilient design. This bridge is built to handle 3 times the expected load. That huge gap between what it is carrying and what it could carry, well, that's the magic ingredient.
And that gap has a name, the margin of safety. It's the buffer you intentionally build into a system. It's not for the things you expect. It's for everything you can't expect. It's your room for error, your cushion against plain old bad luck. And it's your acknowledgement that the world is a messy, unpredictable place.
So how in the world does a brilliant idea for building bridges make the jump to Wall Street? Well, the journey of this idea is actually pretty fascinating. So it all kicks off in the early 1900s as a bedrock rule of engineering. You just don't build a bridge without a massive buffer. Then, in 1934, this incredibly smart investor named Benjamin Graham has a light bulb moment. He realizes the exact same logic that keeps a bridge from falling down could keep a stock portfolio from collapsing. And then, decades later, his most famous student, Warren Buffett, basically turns it into a universal law for thinking about risk in, well, pretty much any field.
So here's how Graham pulled it off. It's genius. He said, okay, imagine you do all your homework on a company and you decide its stock is truly worth about $100 a share. Buying it at 95, that's designing to the edge. That's the fragile bridge. Instead, you wait. You wait until you can buy that same share for maybe $60 or $70. That discount, that $30 or $40 gap, that is your margin of safety. It's the buffer that saves you if your math was a little off, or if the company just hits a rough patch you never saw coming.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because this idea isn't just for engineers or billionaire investors. This is a tool you can use to navigate everyday life.
Think about your calendar. You know that task you think will take 3 hours? Come on, it never actually takes 3 hours, does it? That extra hour you block off just in case, that's a margin of safety against unexpected calls or meetings that run long.
Or how about your finances? Your emergency fund isn't for your rent. You know that bill is coming. No, it's for the chaos you can't predict. The car that dies, the surprise medical bill. That fund is a pure financial margin of safety.
It even works for your health. You don't want to be just healthy enough to get through a normal day. You want a reserve of strength, a health buffer, so that if you do get sick or injured, you have the capacity to bounce back without it spiraling into a major crisis.
Now, there's always a critique, right? And the big knock against this idea is, well, doesn't building in all this extra buffer just seem kind of wasteful? Isn't it just inefficient?
And this really lays out the trade-off perfectly. Sure, if you design to the edge, you get maximum efficiency in the short term. You use less time, less money, fewer resources. But the system is brittle. It's a house of cards. When you design with a margin, you get resilience, you get survival. And the cost is what just looks like inefficiency. That extra steel in the bridge, that cash sitting in a savings account, it looks like it's not doing anything. But that's missing the entire point.
You have to reframe it. That margin isn't waste, it's insurance. It's the premium you pay for a policy against a future you can't possibly predict. And in this complex world we live in, the only thing you can be absolutely certain of is that the unexpected is going to happen.
And if you want to see just how priceless that insurance can be, we need to go to a place where there was literally zero room for error, and the only thing that mattered was making it home alive.
So it's 1970. Apollo 13 is 200,000 miles from home. An oxygen tank explodes. It is a catastrophic, unpredicted, absolute nightmare. But the NASA engineers had built in layers upon layers of safety margins. Backup batteries instantly kicked in, redundant life support systems were there, and most critically, the lunar module, the little ship only designed to land on the moon, was so over-engineered that they could use it as a lifeboat to keep the crew alive all the way back to Earth.
And this is the profound lesson of Apollo 13. All those backups, all that extra capacity, it didn't stop the explosion. It couldn't prevent the crisis. What it did was make an otherwise fatal failure survivable. And that is the ultimate purpose of a margin of safety.
In the end, this isn't about being smart enough to predict everything that can go wrong. No one can do that. It's about being wise enough to build systems that can withstand things going wrong. So the only question left is for you. In your career, in your finances, in your health, where's your margin just a little too thin for comfort?